Obviously, we're having some difficulty with that piece. We'll get back to it a little later. And later this hour, more on what the Obama administration is saying about the events unfolding in Ukraine. Today is an important day for Al Jazeera and the journalists around the world. It's a global day of action for our Al Jazeera colleagues imprisoned in Egypt. Demonstrations around the world drawing attention to those jailed journalists. Patty Culhane reports.
Making a statement with their silence, the solidarity first on display in the Al Jazeera English newsroom in Doha swept across the globe to 40 locations. The message clear and consistent. From the streets of Australia, floating in Indonesia, with balloons released in England, and flying high in Brazil. In every language, one message.
Banner says journalism is not a crime.
A Nobel Peace Prize winner said it in Yemen.
We are asking for the freedom of the thought.
A poet joined the chorus in Mexico, braving the rain in Paris.
Journalism, not a crime.
And the cold in Toronto, all calling for freedom for Al Jazeera's imprisoned journalists.
We want to call on the Egyptian government to release them, as well as on the Canadian government to call for their release publicly and strongly and unequivocally to get them free.
None of the Al Jazeera employees are actually Americans, but that didn't stop the White House press secretary from calling for their immediate release.
We are closely watching the trial of Al Jazeera staff and journalists in Egypt. We understand that the defendants pleaded not guilty and that the trial was adjourned until March 5th. We strongly urge the government to allow these and all journalists to continue to do their jobs, and it is impossible to see how they can do that, how any journalists can do their jobs if they are faced with questionable charges and are detained and on trial.
A call echoed on Capitol Hill.
Locking up reporters has never stopped the world from finding out what is going on in the country, particularly in this modern world.
With petitions delivered to Egyptian embassies across the globe, simple protests from Turkey to Gaza, Washington to Beirut, and flashed across the screens in New York's Times Square, this was a day to send a message in one voice to Egyptian officials. You can put these journalists in a cage, you can put them on trial, but they will not stand alone. The world is watching. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And Congressman Johnson joins us now from Capitol Hill. Congressman, we thank you for your support and thanks for joining us this evening. Can you tell us why you decided to speak out?
Well, I read Mr. Grutzy's letter that was smuggled out of the Egyptian prison. It was published in one of the newspapers, and after reading it, something touched my heart about it, and I thought that there was something that I needed to do. So I immediately drafted a letter, circulated that letter to my colleagues. We had a number that signed on, and we sent that letter to the State Department asking that the State Department take some action to free these Al Jazeera journalists who've been wrongfully imprisoned.
I just talked to 60 Minutes correspondent Bob Simon, and he told me that what needs to happen is that President Obama needs to make a call to the Egyptian government and push for this. Do you think that has happened or needs to happen?
I don't know if it has happened or not, but I think we need calls going out to the Egyptian authorities from the highest levels of the United States government to do what must be done, and that is to free these journalists. After all, the only thing they were doing was their job, which is to report with some degree of accuracy events on the ground. And that's what they were doing, and I think they should be released immediately. I'm hopeful that someone in the administration, I know Jake Carney has already spoken out on it, but I'm hopeful that others are working behind the scenes in a quiet way to free these journalists.
Well, this doesn't just impact the journalists, it also could have an impact and does have an impact on Egyptian citizens. What impact do you think it's having?
Well, I think it has a chilling effect on the quest for democracy that we've seen demonstrated by the Egyptian people over the last few years, with the unrest and the awakening of the people, replacing the authoritarian government with a new government, a new constitution, elections, and that signifies that the people thirst for basic freedom and democracy over in Egypt. And so when the military came in and overthrew the elected government, some may agree or disagree with whether or not that was a proper step. But regardless, it has happened, and so we have to deal with the situation as it is in Egypt. But we cannot stand for any government that we support treating journalists in the way that these Al Jazeera journalists have been treated. It's unacceptable.
Congressman Johnson, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it. It is